All right, here we are. So today in this video, I'd like to talk about something that affects all aspects of creativity, whether you're a writer or a visual artist or a filmmaker, musician, whatever it is that's your sort of chosen path in creativity. And it's a silent killer that is secretly lurking behind some of your biggest inspirations. That might sound a little contradictory at first, but just stick with me here for a second. So, it's very likely that whatever your chosen field is, you didn't choose this by happenstance or randomly, right? It's more likely that somewhere at some point in your life you saw something, you heard something, you experienced something within your chosen medium that moved you in an inexplicable way, and it made you want to just dive in head first to try and decode where this feeling is coming from and how this book or film or painting happened to just connect with your humanity on a more or less inexplicable level. You want to learn how it's done in an effort to be able to replicate it yourself in some way or another, right? And this is essentially where our taste develops. We find that thing that moves us to such a degree, and we want more of it. So we go looking deeper into that writer or that genre even, and we want to explore it to the nth degree as much as we can to try and crack its secrets, its code. Well, I want to talk about this because it's something that I think a lot of creative people experience, and not a lot of the people can sort of articulate this silent killer. I heard someone say that art is a compromise between our vision and our skill, our ability. And I think anybody who's put any meaningful effort towards trying to improve their technical abilities at something knows exactly what I'm talking about. We have that idea in our head of the thing that we want, and inevitably, more often than not, when we put our hands to materials, the result is sometimes less than where we would like it to be. So in this video, I want to further explore this gap, right? The distance between our mind and our hand, and further explore why this can either be something that crushes our motivation and causes us to throw in the towel, and how other people, depending on our sort of constitution, can use this gap as a guiding light towards improvement. One day it feels like you're the kid that everyone supports and encourages, and just like that, you're a middle-aged guy with a home set up, still clinging to that feeling that if I just knuckle down and practice more and try harder, I might make it, whatever that means to us. Somewhere along the way, it dawns on you that you are not playing with the same deck of cards that your creative heroes are playing with. This is a realization that can either become an excuse to quit, or it can be the most grounding and clarifying realization that you need to recenter and refocus back onto the path of mastery. Stick around to the end and I'll explain a little bit more what I'm getting at here. The author Ira Glass calls this distance between our vision and our abilities the taste gap. And it seems a little bit self-evident initially that our taste in what is good and what is not good grows exponentially faster than our ability to replicate that good thing. But for a lot of creatives, our self-identity can sometimes be interwoven with the work that we make. Our work doesn't always feel like something that we did that's separate from us, but it can often feel like a direct reflection of who we are as people. And it's a very dangerous sort of spiral to go down where suddenly our self-perception becomes directly tied into the work that we're making, and that inevitably leads to the bad work that I'm making makes me a bad person. And so when we get to these moments in our skill level where we start to plateau, this is where you either double down and try harder, or people quit. And this gap can be a painful thing to sort of learn to live with. In the book Mastery by George Leonard breaks our ability to process this plateau into three main sort of archetypes, let's say: the dabbler, the hack, and the obsessive. They seem a little self-evident. The dabbler is someone who will jump from hobby to hobby and essentially skip to the next thing as soon as the last thing gets difficult. They're always seeking the next horizon. They're not someone who wants to further explore the craft that they've chosen. They love the new sensation of buying materials, reading the books about the new processes, and as soon as things start to get tough, they move on to the next thing. Then the hack, this is someone who, maybe you know this person, has a sort of innate ability with something and finds that they accelerate through the beginning level fairly quickly and get to a sort of point of satisfaction where they feel like, I'm good enough and there's really no need for me to explore any further and learn any further, and I could just sort of settle here where I am, at not a beginner and not someone who wants to go beyond my current level. Then on the extreme end of things is the obsessive. This is the person who sort of goes through an endless roller coaster cycle of extreme activity and then extreme bouts of inactivity as a result of burnout, essentially. One thing each one of these archetypes all share in common, essentially, is isolation. They avoid honest feedback and a sustained practice on the plateau. This is where the learning actually takes place. Before I could really name this and figure out that I was in this mixture, I would have placed myself firmly in the category of the obsessive, where I would go through long periods of, you know, working late nights, studying anatomy and practicing drawing until I totally fizzled out, and then would go months or sometimes even years without touching my materials. And this is not a good way to develop growth and enjoyment in our skill, right? We sort of have to learn how to get comfortable in those long periods between our next skill level. And usually, the better we get, the longer those plateaus can feel at times, because initially everything is learning and it's always an upticking progress, and then suddenly somewhere along the way things start to flatline or feel like they've flatlined, and the progress can be much more microscopic, and this can sort of be a painful realization at times. Throughout my long stay in the obsessive category, I told myself all kinds of sort of reassuring lies to keep me firmly in this category. I had gone to art school, I had taken the courses. My ego was blocking my path to improvement, as I always told myself that I was doing the right thing, and that if I just double down and practice more, I will improve. And I was really just doing all of this on nights and weekends, after the day job sort of set up, and was self-isolating. And in retrospect, I know that throughout my youth, in sports activities and other places outside of art, my biggest moments of growth always came in those instances where I surrounded myself with those who were objectively better than I was. Even if it wasn't a direct one-on-one teaching scenario, just being in the presence of people who were better than me was enough to help me just watch and learn and try and apply what I saw other people doing into my own practices. After living quite painfully in this obsessive category for some 10 odd years or more, and struggling without really having a way to pinpoint what I was struggling with and why it was frustrating me so badly, I finally decided to take some sort of action and seek mentorship and group artwork through online means. When I finally found the mentor that sort of aligned with my aesthetic philosophy, one of his biggest lessons, I suppose, for lack of a better term, that he emphasized was to lower the emotional stakes of our practice. I don't know about musicians and writers or filmmakers, but at least in the visual art field, artists have a tendency to expect a masterpiece each time they sit down to do some kind of work. And there's a tendency to always do a completed, fully realized piece of work each time they sit down. And the idea of sort of small targeted repetition is lost on many beginner and even intermediate artists. And we have to realize that a bodybuilder does not get jacked by going into the gym and lifting the largest weight in the room one time and expecting big results and big gains. It comes from targeted, focused, daily repetition. It's not just the one weight the one time. but when we have a leg day and an arm day and a chest day, etc., and we can focus on all of these areas where we're not exactly at our strongest, we create repetition and we can start to make improvements. So this idea of lowering the emotional stakes of our practice and the value of targeted repetition ties directly into one of my mentor's core principle philosophies, which was the value of what he called little wins. Just the value of bringing yourself to the table every day with intention, right? And just doing something is better and more valuable than doing nothing for that day. Before I got in this mentorship, like many of you, I spent a lot of time leaning into the tired motivational tropes of just keep practicing and you'll improve. Practice makes perfect, right? Trust the process and all of that bullshit that is really not so substantive and doesn't really get us anywhere. And we inevitably we oscillate between ambition and despair, and we tell ourselves things that sound reasonable, but can sometimes be more detrimental than we realize. The author of The War of Art, Stephen Pressfield, refers to this as resistance. And resistance, as Pressfield puts it, this is not about laziness, right? It's actually almost the opposite. It's not lack of effort, but misplaced effort. And our squishy little brains cannot differentiate the difference between the actual threat of physical harm to our persons as the bear coming into the cave as it does with our feeling of fear of failure from what we're doing. The same neurological synapses are firing in both of those incidences. So resistance becomes a means of self-preservation. This is not necessarily the voice of self-doubt or the imposter syndrome. That's sort of something separate. This is not the one that says you're not good enough, but a silent killer, a more reasonable voice that steers you away from doing anything but sitting down and confronting your work. This is the one that convinces you that you need to study more or buy different materials or do more research instead of just sitting down and doing the actual work, right? Sometimes we feel like research and looking at the books or more tutorials is doing something. It feels productive, but nothing will move the needle like just sitting down to our work. You might think that as our skill improves, the pain of this gap between our mind and our hand would be smaller, but it can actually tend to grow exponentially. As our skill improves, our standard also raises. It can almost feel more painful as we improve our skill that we're still not hitting the masterpieces that we always envisioned ourselves, the magnum opus compositions that the great musical composers were creating, or the great master painters of yesteryear were making, right? And one of the hardest pills to swallow as we try to improve our skills is that this gap never really fully closes, and it's something that we have to just make peace with and accept the fact that if you're truly on, for lack of a better term, the path to mastery, this gap will never close and is something that we have to make peace with and learn to create alongside of rather than fight against. This acceptance of the lifelong learner is really where a lot of beginner and intermediate creatives get stuck. They feel this pressure, not just from social media and other outside sources, but they feel a pressure within themselves to essentially find their voice before they're ready. They're demanding to run before they learn how to walk. And you really can't find your voice before you've even learned the language, right? For centuries, mastery has come in one form or another through the means of imitation. Musicians study great compositions. Artists do master studies and master copies. Famed gonzo journalist Hunter S. Thompson was known to have sat down at his typewriter and retyped entire volumes of Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald, word for word retyping a book. When asked why he would undertake something like this, he would say, "I want to know what it feels like to be a good writer. I want to hear the music that a typewriter makes when a master work is being created." That's why this tradition of copying the greats has endured for centuries and has become a means of learning the fundamentals for students. This form isn't cheap, as a lot of people might think it to be, and this is how we really learn to build before we can invent. At the beginning of this video, we said that we're not all playing with the same cards as our creative inspirations, and at first it seems self-evident that we're not dealing in the same deck of cards as your Michelangelos or your Mozarts, right? Time, money, circumstances, opportunities, all of these things play their respective roles in our present skill level, how much time we have to dedicate to our practice, and how motivated we are to continue to pursue our practice sort of outside of our daily 9 to 5 sort of life, right? Or whatever it is that we're doing when we're not sitting down and doing our work. The thing is, mastery is never about having the best hand, but learning to play the cards that were dealt in the best way possible. Envy will ask, why don't I have what they have? Sort of the Salieri effect. While mastery will ask, given what I have, what's the next honest step to take to improve my skills in a meaningful way? So, if you are still feeling that sort of sting of that realization of the distance between your imagination and your ability, your mind's eye and your actual skill, you're not failing. This is a great signal that your taste is still alive. You're still burning to improve and reach that upper level to where you're making the meaningful work that you are always meant to be making. The gap isn't a final verdict. It's a signal. It's where the real work can finally get going. I hope that something about this video today resonated with you And if you want to see more content like this in the sort of life and times of what it means to be a creative person and how we can balance our day-to-day life with our creative personality, hit that like and subscribe button. Happy creating out there, and we'll see you in the next one.